Warning, this episode is extremely theory heavy. If you just want the TLDR, we've linked this chart in the description. If you already understand everything on this chart, you can probably just skip this episode. Anyway, let's start.
First off, we will cover intervals. So what is an interval? An interval is defined as distance between two notes. As mentioned back in episode 1, we learned that in a piano roll, there exist 12 different notes, which also means that there are 12 plus 1 different intervals. Let's start by going through all 12 plus 1 different types of intervals using the C note as a reference point. A good way to measure intervals is by using semitones as a unit. For intervals that span 12 semitones or more, just keep subtracting 12 from the interval until you reach one that's on the table. That's what the interval is equivalent to. For example, 13 semitones would be equivalent to 1 semitone, which is a minor second.
Fun fact, there are alternative names for each interval. For example, a major second can also be labeled as a diminished third. These alternate names may be used depending on the context.
Of course, these intervals work at any point of the piano roll. So for example, if you wanted to find a perfect fourth above the note E, just count 5 semitones above the note E and you will arrive at your answer, A. Get yourself familiarized with intervals as they will be used in the next topic, chords.
A chord consists of multiple notes stacked together that are played and heard simultaneously. However, we are only going to focus on basic triad chords. As the name implies, triads are made from 3 notes, a root, a third, and a fifth. A root refers to the first note of the chord. As its name suggests, you can think of the root as a chord's foundation. A third refers to an interval of a third over the root note. A fifth refers to an interval of a fifth over the root note. Depending on the type of chord, that third interval could either be a major third or a minor third. Similarly, that fifth interval could either be a diminished fifth, perfect fifth, or augmented fifth. We will now introduce you to 4 different types of basic triads. A major chord consists of a root, a major third, and a perfect fifth. It sounds bright and heavy. A minor chord consists of a root, a minor third, and a perfect fifth. It sounds sad. If you notice, the only difference between a major chord and a minor chord is the third. The root and fifth stay the same. However, both chords feel totally different. Why is that? That's because the third of a chord is a very important note that determines the chord quality. A diminished chord consists of a root, a minor third, and a diminished fifth. It sounds dark and full of tension due to the tritone interval between C and G flat that wants to resolve somewhere. An augmented chord consists of a root, a major third, and an augmented fifth. It has an anxious feeling to it. Augmented chords are quite rare, not just in Touhou style music, but also in general, since how they sound is naturally difficult to make sound good.
Now that we know our 4 basic chords, let's return to scales. Why scales? Because we can build different types of chords directly from a scale. We will only be focusing on the minor scale, as most Touhou songs are in a minor key. Let's use the A minor scale as a reference and find the triads that are built from it. For each of the 7 different notes in this scale, we will build a triad with that note as its root. Let's start by building a triad on the first note of the scale, A. As mentioned before, the triad consists of the root, third, and fifth. With reference to the A minor scale, the third note from an A is a C, while the fifth note from an A is an E. Therefore, our first chord has an A, C, and E. Now, let's do this again on the second note, B. The third note from a B is a D, while the fifth note is an F. Hence, our chord consists of B, D, and F. Repeat for the rest of the notes, and you'll end up with these chords. These 7 chords are known as the diatonic chords of our key. Our next step is to determine the quality of each chord. Let's start with the first chord, A, C, E. A and C are 3 semitones apart and thus form a minor third. A and E are 7 semitones apart and thus form a perfect fifth. As you saw earlier, a minor third and a perfect fifth put together form a minor chord. Since this chord begins on A, we will call this an A minor chord. Pause the video and try to name the other 6 chords. If you did it correctly, it should look like this. You can also refer to these chord qualities with this shorthand notation. Hence, we can see that the diatonic chords of a natural minor scale consists of a particular sequence of 3 minor chords, 3 major chords, and 1 diminished chord. This sequence is not unique to A minor. Any minor key will have the same pattern. To convince yourself of this fact, go ahead and pause the video and write out the diatonic chords of a different minor key.
Just using the root plus quality names of chords isn't very helpful when you don't know what key you're in, since the same chord could have vastly different uses depending on the key. As with everything so far, we'd much rather talk about stuff in relation to some other bass note rather than in terms of absolute pitch.
Therefore, we'll be using Roman numeral chord notation, in which the chords of a scale will be represented by Roman numerals that denote its scale degree. Since there are 7 different notes in a typical scale, we are only concerned with the numerals from 1 to 7.
Major chords are often listed as a capitalized Roman numeral, while minor chords are often listed as an uncapitalized Roman numeral. Diminished chords can be notated with a dim or the diminished symbol beside the Roman numeral, and augmented chords can be notated with an aug or a plus beside the Roman numeral.
Let's look at the 7 diatonic chords we built from the A minor scale before. In Roman numeral chord notation, they would look like this.
However, not everyone uses the same system for notating these chords. For example, some people on the western side name their chords with respect to the parallel major key. Parallel keys are major and minor keys that share the same tonic note. So, if you see someone using flat VI, then they're speaking in respect to the parallel major key.
Also, the Chinese Touhou style community names their chords with respect to the relative major scale. Relative keys are major and minor scales that share the same key signature with one another. The relative major of A minor is C major, so under the alternative system, we would notate our chords like this.
In our future videos, you might see chord progressions that contain chords not part of our minor scale diatonics. For example, we might use major 5 instead of minor 5. This is called modal interchange, in which we borrow from other scales. For instance, in an A minor scale, major 5 would mean to build a major chord based on the 5th note of the scale, giving you E, G sharp, B. However, G sharp is not a part of the A minor scale.
Now that we've gotten through all of the boring theory stuff, we can finally get into the interesting stuff. Next episode.
C, E, G, C, E flat, G, C, E flat, G flat, C, E, G sharp,